Anyway, it's great to be at Batavia Covenant Church. So it'll be 36 years ago, made two of the most important decisions in my life. One followed the other almost immediately. The first was I married my wife, Rana. We got married at a place called Newport Covenant Church in Bellevue, Washington. That was my entrance, the second great decision, my entrance into the Covenant Church. I have been amazed because I'd never heard about this, as maybe some of others of you who are new to the denomination. We're small, and a lot of people don't know us. But Rana and I, within 6 months after marriage, we were sent as short-term missionaries to Japan. We thought that was going to be the end. Just get the 2 years over and get back to the States and get on with our lives. We actually left Japan 26 years later. And that was to come to serve with Covenant World Relief. I love being part of this small part of God's kingdom because from the beginning I heard that back in the 1800s when all these Swedish people were coming from Sweden as immigrants, there was this passion for reaching out, for mission. And so actually, even though there was this kind of ethnic camaraderie at that time, stronger yet was the desire to join together so that we could participate in God's mission in the world. And I'm thankful that we have not lost that as our core passion. And Covenant World Relief is just one part of that passion. I'm hoping this is going to work. Is it on PowerPoint? Wow. Okay, we're going to try. If I just go like this, then that's this. Okay. Okay. Can we go to the next slide? We'll keep. Covenant World Relief, as Pastor Eric explained earlier, is this portion of the covenant mission and ministry. We're part of something called Serve Globally that encompasses all of the international ministries. And our focus is on immediate disaster relief, long-term development, and then longer-term transformation, community transformation, individuals, families, and whole communities. When we talk about Covenant World Relief, sometimes the natural image that people have is responding to disasters. So in the prayer, the Philippines was mentioned this morning. We are there through partners responding to that super typhoon that so devastated the northern part of the Philippines. Hurricane Florence, in the last couple of years, we've transitioned now. We're working with the ministry priority of the covenant called Love, Mercy, Do Justice. You saw the executive director. She was the first person in the video, Cecilia Williams. There's responding. Covenant churches are responding through LMDJ to those who are suffering after Hurricane Florence. Okay. Whoa, look at that. It works. So there is this immediate response that's required after a disaster. But the reality is that just helps people kind of come back sometimes to perhaps, hopefully, to where they were before the disaster. And while that's very important, we believe that we should never just stop there and say, okay, we're done, let's get out of here. Really, relief should be followed by long-term recovery. Right now, in Yemen, there is perhaps, in the last year, the greatest humanitarian disaster. Now, some would argue that it's in the Rohingya people who have fled from Burma, but they're both huge. And we're involved with both through partners. But this doesn't get a lot of media attention. You know, more than 1 million people in the last year have contracted cholera. And this is in the midst of a civil war where they don't have enough food, they don't have water. And because we have partners, we're able to respond there. And I'm thankful that Batavia Covenant Church is a part of this. You may not know it, but you are. As your church, year by year, gives to Covenant World Relief, the funds are going to places like this. One of the great advantages we have is that churches trust us. And most of our funds that are given are just given to us, and we are able to use them where most needed. So thank you for trusting us. And please know that you're a part of all of this. Of course, the biggest Syrian or refugee crisis is from Syria. And we're engaged in the small country right next door called Lebanon. Lebanon has today the highest percentage of refugees in their country. As many as 1 in 5 people, some say even 1 in 4, who are in the country are refugees. Most are Syrian refugees, some are Palestinian refugees. I was just there in February and was able to see the great work going on among the Syrian refugees. In Ecuador, a couple years ago, there was an earthquake. It was big. There was a lot of destruction, a lot of people killed. But as in many disasters, after a few weeks, as human beings, we get tired of hearing about it, and so it just kind of dies down. But I'm here to tell you today that this group of people, which represent a much larger group, from a covenant church in Manta, Ecuador, called the La Victoria Covenant Church, they are still engaged in a project called the Good Samaritan Project, where they are helping people recover. Recovery from disaster, especially major disasters, is not a matter of days or weeks. It's always months, and it's often years and sometimes decades. So the great thing is that we have this great partnership through the Covenant Church of Ecuador with a smaller church out on the coast that is engaged. They are committed. And I'm looking for, Ron and I will be there in November to see a bit of their work. So later on, I'm going to go on to the longer term work that we do, because I really think that is always our goal. Because transformation doesn't happen usually overnight. Transformation doesn't happen in a week. Actually, transformation is something that God is doing in each one of us for our whole lifetime. And this is the kind of ministry that we want to be engaged in around the world. So the passage that we had read for us today from 2 Kings is, if you've grown up in the church, you've heard that story a time or two, or maybe 100 or 200 times. It struck me not too long ago as I was reading it that there's some things that I've been missing. So first of all, you've got a woman who's in a desperate situation. She comes to the prophet Elisha, and she says to Elisha, "Your servant is dead. My husband is dead. And I've been left with the situation. Now I'm in debt. And I fear they're going to come and take my sons." She's a very desperate woman. You know, being a widow, even today in most of the world, is perhaps the most vulnerable kind of person there is. In many cultures, women who are, especially women who are younger, are susceptible to rape. Because once the husband's gone, sometimes in the community, they're seen as available to anyone. Financially, in many places of the world, widows are not able to inherit their husband's property. And so they're left without means. And here's a woman who is desperately trying to figure out what's going to happen. My husband was devoted to God, and now he's gone, and they're going to take my sons, and what's going to happen to me? And the prophet Elisha, his response was so natural. His first question was, "What can I do to help you?" That's the most natural question, and it's a great question. And that's what's happening right now throughout the covenant, as we see on our TV screens, what's happened in the southeast part of the U.S. We're getting calls saying, "What can I do to help? What can we do? What are we doing?" So it's natural. What's interesting in the passage is that the prophet goes on and asks a second question that's on the screen. To me, this really is a powerful question and a very important question. First he says, "What can I do to help?" Then he says, "What do you have in your house?" I think too often we stop at the first question. And then we have the mentality that whoever we're asking the question to has no capability for doing anything for themselves. That God has made them totally helpless. that there is nothing they can do. And yet if you read Scripture, you find out that we have a God who loves to take whatever is available and do miraculous things. It happens all the time. Look at Jesus when he's feeding the 5,000. Jesus is the Messiah, the Son of God. He could have just snapped his fingers and had some nice tables and, put out a big spread. But, of course, his followers he asked the question first, what do we got? And they said, yeah, we've got 5 loaves and 2 fishes. Okay, let's start with that. Let's take that. And that's what Jesus started with. So how many loaves? We got 5 loaves. For thousands of people, look what God did. Look at Moses standing before Yahweh in the beginning of Exodus, where Moses is very nervous about what this Yahweh is asking him to do, right? To go and save his people. So Moses is kind of hesitating. Finally, Yahweh asks Moses a question. Do you remember that question he asked him? What do you have in your hand? Do you remember what he had? He had a stick. He had a stick. Yeah, what's this going to do? Well, immediately God displayed his power when he threw it down. It turned into a serpent. But eventually, that stick was what parted the Red Sea. That stick was what got water coming out of a rock. God uses what we have for his kingdom and his glory. And so in this story, Elisha asks the woman, what do you have in your house? Well, the woman's kind of taken back, going, I haven't got anything. Oh, wait. No, I got a little bit of oil. Now, you know that she had a lot more than just a little bit of oil, right? And this is the case with a lot of our mentality between the rich and the poor in the world. Sometimes the rich, those of us that have enough, just want to shower things on the poor and just assume that they have nothing. But what else does this woman have besides a little bit of oil? Her sons. What an amazing asset. She's got sons. What else? Okay, this is perhaps one of the keys to this passage. So she's got her health too. She's got a house. I mean, there are other things there. But think about the question when the prophet says, go out and collect the jars. What if this had been a cranky woman who had no friends? How many jars would she have gotten? Apparently, she had a lot of friends. We know that because they just kept pouring and pouring and pouring, and it stopped pouring only when the jars ran out, right? And then she goes back and reports to the prophet, okay, I filled all the jars. And there's probably, who knows, just so many, because he says, all right, you're able to pay off your debt completely, debt-free, and live on the rest. Look what God did in this situation, because Elijah knew that God was going to do something great, but God was going to use what was there, and he used what was in that house. You know, in India, there's a partner of Covenant World Relief called the Hindustani Covenant Church. It's our largest partner. They had a passion. There were also missionaries from Sweden who used to be there. And the Swedish missionaries, Covenant missionaries, and the Covenant Church, they had a passion for seeking to provide access to clean water to people in India. And they came up with a pump in the 80s that UNICEF had requested that they improve and perfect. And as they got to that point, UNICEF said, yes, this is the pump we want. It's called the India Mark II Deep Well Hand Pump. If you've traveled around the world, but particularly in developing countries, you've probably seen it. I go to Haiti all the time, it's there. It's all over Africa. It's in different parts of Asia. Do you know that pump, you can look on it. It will say, India Mark II or Mark III, Deep Well Hand Pump, comes from this little village in Solapur, India, from the Covenant Church. They estimate that there are millions of these pumps around the world. God took what they had and he performed a miracle. And I believe that there would be individual testimonies today where you could share a story like that, where something that God took that you had, or maybe even yourself, and has performed a miracle. I think our denomination is a miracle. We were this little group that started in the Midwest. And to think that now there's a covenant church in Congo that's far bigger than us, 1 million people involved in that church. The fact that Covenant World Relief is able, this little organization, part of the Covenant Church, we're engaged in 26 countries with 34 partners. God takes what we have and he uses it for his kingdom and glory. Now we get the privilege of working with some pretty amazing people who understand this. And one of the things that many of our partners recognize is when it comes to leaders, they know that God has placed people in the community to lead. And so in the eastern part of Congo, there's an organization called HOLD, the Humanitarian Organization for Lasting Development. And this is in Goma, Congo. And if you know anything about eastern Congo, you know it's a very unstable, dangerous area. It's called the gender violence capital of the world. And here they're working with young women, many of them who have been raped and as a result of rape got pregnant and had children. And regardless of that, they're still shamed because they're unmarried with children. And this is an organization that helps these women not just develop livelihood so they can take care of their children and themselves, but they have a whole new understanding of who God is and how God has created them in the image of God and that they have dignity and worth. And it's this Desage, who's one of these women who came in filled with despair, and now she's one of the leaders of this organization. She is going out to communities to share this good news of God's love for us and the fact that nobody needs to be shamed in God's eyes. God loves everyone. And the day we were there in February, we were there for several days, but one of the days we went out, it was Valentine's Day actually, and they went out to the schools. These young women and some young men who were part of the group as well, but they said, this is Valentine's Day. Be ready. The boys are going to try to take advantage of you today. And this is how you can prepare yourself and protect yourself. And they had the rapt attention of the whole school, doing skits and helping these. These are people who themselves had been in despair, had been transformed, and now they are leading. What do you have in your house, in your community? We've got leaders. What do we have? Personal experience. So, yes, I mentioned the Hindustani Covenant Church. Several years ago, they came into relationship with Gangabai. Gangabai had been involved with the commercial sex industry. She had been sold into a brothel. She wanted to come out, and there was this divine appointment where somehow they met someone from the Hindustani Covenant Church. They brought her out. Her life was transformed, and they said, wow, and God, this is an amazing thing, but maybe we should be thinking about this as a ministry. And they thought, okay, who's going to be in charge? And they thought, wait a second. Gangabai is the one who's been there for 15 years. She's got the relationship. She knows what these women go through. So guess who became the leader? Gangabai. And Panna, who lives in the community as well, was able to gather the children of the commercial sex workers so that they are not forced, as in many cases, just to go under the bed when mothers work. They're able to go into another building and have what they call a non-formal education experience every day. It's Panna who knew who to connect and how to get that place and how to do the remodeling. And then there's the Home of Hope that Women Ministries helped fund many years ago when there was the Break the Chains campaign. The Home of Hope is a place where women who come out are transformed, and they're given counseling, and they're provided training for jobs and prepared for entering into the world. Some, it only takes a few months. Some, it takes many years because of the scarring. But it's at this Home of Hope that one of the things that they do is make communion wafers, and I understand from Pastor Eric that you've used them here before, and all of those wafers are made in the Home of Hope. And it's all a local industry. It's not us going in and saying, this is what we want you to do. This is what they are doing. They have the experience. There's an organization in South Africa, the leaders of which are speaking in a covenant church in Madison, Wisconsin this morning, and they're coming to our house this evening for supper to meet with the board of Covenant World Relief. It's the organization called Zimele Wetu. They really get this idea of what do you have in your house, because they have been working with women for a long time, and they're women, they're mostly Zulu women who have been culturally oppressed, because in their culture, women are seen as their only worth is producing babies. And so they have been kept from getting an education. They have been kept from having any kind of voice. And then, of course, apartheid, which you've, I'm sure, heard about. That is the even greater oppression that these women have lived through. But Zimele Wetu has gathered these women together, and they do small businesses together. And they themselves are being transformed. But the beauty is, they go beyond that transformation to the level of transformation that I think is really pure kingdom transformation. Because as these women were walking down the road, I thought the light was good. I'm always looking to get some good photographs. And as I always do, I asked if it was okay if I take their photo. And by their expression, I don't think they were super happy, because it was translated. But after I took the photo, Audrey, the executive director, said, "You probably think these women are carrying water for themselves. They're not. They're carrying water for people in the community who can't get the water themselves." We went over to one of these communities where the mother of the household was in a distant place trying to earn some money. The father had been injured and was sick and was incapable of doing any work. So they come in and they take care of the yard, they do the laundry, they do cooking. These are women themselves who the world would say, are still living in a certain level of poverty. But their minds have been transformed, and they have been changed, and now they want to be a part in changing others. And as we were driving out, we drove by this woman sitting, and I said, "Who's that?" And they said, "That's widow somebody." And she was living on the outskirts of town, and she kept getting robbed. So we said, we want you to come into the center, and we're going to build you a house. And these women, with their own hands, built her a house. Now, that was a couple of years ago when I was there. This last spring, I went, here's the woman inside her new house. She's got her own toilet there in the yard. She was so excited. She was praising God the whole time. We were trying to have a discussion. She just kept praising God. But these women who were in the community themselves, who had been transformed, they were the resource. They were the ones that God was using to bring about the change. I just, on Sunday, got back from Mexico, where one of the organizations that we work in partnership with is the Family Development Foundation. And that was founded by Covenant missionaries John and Letha Curl, who are supported by your church, right? They'll be here next month. I graduated from high school, the same high school as John, out in Washington State. But they're now regional coordinators for Europe. But they were in Mexico as covenant missionaries, and they helped start this ministry. This ministry has changed and grown. All the missionaries are gone from that area because of the violence that came. And it was a natural, healthy transition. And this organization that is there now, they're putting a stronger emphasis on children and youth, because they see the future on these communities that have been so affected by drugs and violence. And so they bring the youth in with the intention not just to do some nice things for some kids, but they're looking to the kids saying, these are the future leaders. And it is true. As these kids grow up, they become leaders. A few years ago when I was there, they lined up a few full-time staff, some part-time and volunteers, and there were 20-some people. All but 2 had come up and raised up through the program. Isn't that amazing? God took the kids from that community, and now they're leading the ministry. Sometimes working with the poor, we just assume that people don't have any finance. There's an organization in Kenya called Jitokeze that gets women into groups and gets them saving, but also gets them working together in their agriculture. And it's women in that culture. The men take care of the animals. They're pastoralists. The women do the agriculture. And as they get together in these groups and they learn from each other and help each other, they are transformed. And there's, let's see. Maybe reverse is not working today. The picture that got passed over was women who were very proud of their crops. And what's happened in the process, the men became envious of the women. And seeing all that they were doing and the change was coming about, and so they said, can we have our own groups? And now they're doing men's groups as well. There they are, yeah. What do you have in your community? We do have some funds. Not a lot, but they just get people saving. Little by little, they build up their savings. This is a big one. I don't want to step on anybody's toes, but sometimes, I'm just telling you that sometimes when North Americans, or I'll say U.S. and Canada, the people, when we go overseas for a project, we sometimes forget that there are capable people who are living there that we should be working with. And I know that there's this desire, because I was raised in a family where you always look to help people to the point that you do things for them. My dad loved doing things for people, and he was so generous with his time. But when you just simply do things for people, you leave them disempowered. You feel good about what you've done, but they just feel like, look what these people did for us, but we didn't do it. My dad loved fixing my 51 straight 8 Pontiac that always broke down. I bought it for $32. And he always would say, don't worry, I'll fix it. Well, that's great. But when I moved away from home, when my dad was gone, what was I left with? I had no clue how to fix that car. When in Honduras, there's an organization called Cose Perdil, a local organization that works with the communities to help them get water systems from mountain springs. And they have to do all the labor. They even give some of the funds for the project themselves. So by the time that they get done, they are so proud of what they have done. And when we come and we celebrate with them, it's, yes, there is a time of thanks, but it's not thank you because you gave us this water system. In the prayer of this particular one, it was, God, with your help, look what we have done. And this woman, it was so great, she said, this is my water jug that I have been using to get water every day. And I thought I'd be doing this for the rest of my life. But with God's help, we now have this water system. And she took that jug and she threw it in the air, and it came down with a crash. It was a very powerful moment. And I have one of those pieces, and I forgot to bring it this morning because I often carry it with me. It's in my office to remind me of what God has done through the people, with what they had. Expertise. In Laos, Ron and I are leaving tomorrow to visit 2 partners in Nepal, and then the following week we'll be going to Laos. And in Laos, there's an organization that Covenant missionaries Peter and Ruthie Dutton have helped us get into relationship with. And this is an organization that does silk, and they do silk with a lot of expertise. And they start by helping the villagers learn the importance of growing the mulberry bushes, which means using the manure from the cows to grow healthy mulberry bushes, and then taking the leaves, and then raising the silkworms themselves, and then spinning the thread, and producing some really fine, this is the woman who's in charge, Komali, making beautiful fabric. What do they have? They've got expertise. There's no way that I could ever even begin to think of how to do any of this stuff. It's the local people there that are doing it. And then finally, the local church. Wow, what an asset a church is and always should be in any community. God has placed Batavia Covenant Church strategically in this community for a reason. There is a world out there. People have often said this, and some react, but the church is the one organization that doesn't exist just for itself. The church actually predominantly exists for everyone outside. That's why we're here. To get equipped, yes, as individuals, but as a church in general, to care and love and serve those outside the church. In Kenya, there is the Kitengela Covenant Church, and it was a small church of about 50 in a very simple little block brick building with tin roof, mostly very poor people. And one day, 240 refugees from the Congo showed up. This was like 10 years ago. And they showed up and they said, we've walked and hitched rides from eastern Congo, and they came to basically the Nairobi area. This is Kitengela as a suburb. And Pastor Simon, who's standing there on the left, I would have said, you expect us to do something? We're a little church of 50. You're 240 people. You don't have any papers. What are we going to do for you? Fortunately, Pastor Simon had a much broader vision and understanding and actually experience with refugees. He basically opened his arms and said, come on in. Do you know, today, there are 2 churches in Kitengela now. One of them is about 700, and most of the people in that church are Congolese refugees. And the other church is several hundred. They have worked with refugees all these years. They've gotten them, they've worked with the government, and got them settled, helped them learn English, and, well, most of them speak Swahili already, but get the kids in school and do job training to help them be able to settle. This little church, God used just the poor little church to do this amazing miracle in the Kitengela area. What do you have in your house? What do you have in your community? We've got the church. This is the God that we serve. The God who takes whatever we have and uses it for his kingdom and his power and his glory. So in closing, the question is today, what do you have in your house? Think about that as a question for yourself. What's God given you? What does God want to use? And often our response, most human beings will say, not much. Not much there. Reality is God has given you enough, whatever it is. What about your family? And then what about the church? What about Batavia Covenant Church? I'll bet if we just started going around the room and talking about the expertise and experience, giftedness, it would just be overwhelming as we saw the diversity of what is in this group of believers. What do you have in your house that God can use and perform the miracles that, that story in the Old Testament, some people say, well, that was a one-time thing. God's not going to do that kind of miracle. God is doing miracles in his way all the time. Did you notice that was a pretty quiet miracle? The prophet told her to shut the door, right? So she wasn't on display. It wasn't on display. The neighbors weren't peeking in and saying, what's going on here? Sometimes God's miracles are quiet, and sometimes they are there for the whole world to see. We get to be a part of all of it. God calls us to use whatever he's given us for his kingdom and glory. Let's pray. God, we're thankful today that you have called us, you have loved us, you have accepted us as your people. Not just to have a warm, fuzzy fellowship, but God, to continue this amazing mission, participate in your mission in the world. And God, we're thankful that you really love the world. There are no God-forsaken places. We may look at places and think that, but in every place we know you are present, you are active, and you are loving every person. Father, open our eyes. Help us to see who these neighbors are. I pray for the Batavia Covenant Church, that in this community, they would continue to ask the question, what do we have in our house? And even in working with people outside, what do you have in your house? Working together to see the amazing work you're going to do. And then as we continue to think about Batavia Covenant Church, individuals, the denomination, as we look beyond this place around the world, thank you that you allow us to participate in your work and your ministry. We give you all the praise and glory and honor in Jesus' name. Amen.